Hi, I'll pick up in this video where I left off in the last. Wenn man dem Triller einen lahmen Nachschlag anhängt, Figur 32. Wenn man dem letztern noch ein Nötgen beifügt, Figur 33, welches man mit Recht unter die verwerflichen Nachschläge rechnen kann. Wenn man den Triller nicht gehörig aushält, ungeachtet aller Arten davon, bis auf den Prall-Triller, so lange geschlagen werden müssen, als die Geltung der Note, worüber er steht, dauert. Wenn man in den Triller, welcher durch einen Vorschlag angeschlossen ist, hineinplumpt, ohne den Vorschlag zu machen oder ihn an den Triller zu hängen. Wenn man diesen frechen Triller auf das Stärkste schlägt, ungeachtet der Gedanke schwach und matt vorgetragen werden soll. Wenn man endlich zu viel trillert, indem man glaubt, verbunden zu sein, jedwede etwas lange Note mit einem Triller zu bezeichnen, so begeht man eben so hässliche als gewöhnliche Fehler. Diese sind die lieblichen Trillerchen, von denen schon im Eingange Paragraph 10 etwas erwähnt worden ist. So here's figure 32, and there you can see the bow is going over. It's representing that the first, it doesn't mean that this is to be played legato. It's showing how it's written in the score in the first bar, and then in the second bar how it's performed. So what does Bach mean by a lame afterstroke or Nachschlag? And there you can see what he means by that. It's an afterstroke or Nachschlag or turn at the end of the trill that doesn't have, you can see it's not in time, it doesn't keep any pulse. So that's what he's talking about. So there'll be people who do that, and you can hear that, how you can probably imagine how people will think they're being expressive or dramatic or whatever it is, that it makes them more profound, or I don't know what. But what they do is they ruin all those things of music that feed the soul. And one big one of that is the pulse. So there's figure 32. And here's figure 33. And so when one adds, so another big mistake Bach says is that when one adds an extra note to the Nachschlag. And here's an evidence of that. When I said that when I was talking about Rondo alla Turca and the Nachschlag, that Bach will refer to he'll refer, when he says Nachschlag, he'll mean both. Like he can either mean the normal turn at the end of the trill, or the fast notes at the end that replace the Nachschlag. Then he'll still call that the Nachschlag. So here I put forward this as evidence to support my claim that he does that, because he does that here. And so he says when you add one note to the extra note to the Nachschlag, one can count that among the objectionable Nachschläge or afterstrokes. So here it is. You can see the extra note is the F. And this figure here, we can go back to the lesson on K330 with Bach and on the trill, and in deciding what trill, how are we meant to perform that trill. And if you think of the trill where those two notes, the version where you trill and you add those two notes at the end of the trill, that they become the Nachschlag, so there's no break in the trill with those two notes, and so the trill goes with those two notes and then to the G. This figure 33 can be used when considering that, because if you think about that Nachschlag that trill in K330 has, that as well is just adding one extra note, because the notes of the trill will be F, E, F, E, F, E, and the extra note will be the G. So it's not the same as figure 33 exactly, because in figure 33 the notes of the trill are F, E, F, E, F, E, and the extra note is the D on the bottom instead of a G on top. But essentially it's exactly the same. It's the one extra note being added. To the notes of the trill. So you could think about that and think that maybe playing those notes and only having the F, E, F, E in K330 and only having the G extra, that Bach might say the same thing about that. And if you connect it as well to what Bach says about that example, that it was exactly the same as K330, Trill saying it can't be the slowest. Why can it not be the slowest? Because one could say, even though it's not exactly identical here, it's still one extra note. So that element is consistent with the two examples with figure 33 and K330, or that example that Bach says can't be the slowest. And that he says that because one could perhaps count that version to the more objectionable Nachschlag. And why is it objectionable? Because it's such a anticlimax, it's so pathetic. It's one note. If you could compare it to the Appassionata, it might be the most famous Nachschlag in classical music. It's a lot more than just one extra note. So that could be, so you could be use that and think, so what would Bach's advice be on playing K330 with that trill and adding those two notes of the Nachschlag on without any break? He might say you can count that among the more objectionable versions. So that might not be on top of his list in terms of recommendations. So what does that leave you with? It doesn't answer it completely, because there's flaws. I mean, there's so many flaws in that piece that one has to compensate for the deficiencies of the composition. So it's not like dealing with a Mozart sonata, K330. So the answer still hasn't been arrived at, but you are hearing more. You can rate the three different versions. One we were able to completely rule out as being completely wrong, and that was the Nachschlag being added to the two notes written in the normal Nachschlag being added without a break. That is 100% incorrect. The other version is playing with a Nachschlag where you have the break and then the two notes afterwards are played twice as short as the notation indicates. That's the other version. And then you have here the version where the two notes take the place of the Nachschlag, and you could think that Bach would count them among the more objectionable Nachschläge. So if they're not in the proper place, if they're not, and he's given a clue as to what one of the, what's the sits of such a trill with such a Nachschlag. One is that the tempo can't be the slowest. And you could argue that K330 doesn't fit to that because the tempo is not the slowest. But with K330, that trill is like it's meant to be a feature, a highlight, because take that away, what do you have left? And it might make a lousy highlight. So that's a bit more information that one can use in trying to figure out what's the correct answer, or in your lesson with Bach. Bach might include that information and say you can count that among the more objectionable Nachschläge. So and then he says another mistake is when people don't hold the trill, keep the trill going long enough, and that it should be held as long as the as the value of the note is over which it is written. And the only exception to that is the prol trill or the half trill. And then he says, when in a trill which is connected, through a Vorschlag is angeschlossen. So the angeschlossene Triller, the connected trill. When one ignores that appoggiatura and just plops in without doing the trill, or without hanging the trill on the appoggiatura, in terms of what he says about these trills being, or these mistakes being common, and how relevant that is, in the Appassionata, every single person on the roll of honour makes that mistake. In the Appassionata or angeschlossene Triller, every single person on the roll of honour makes that. They just plop in immediately with the trill. And I'm gonna, in the paragraph after this, Bach will be talking about the trills from below. And essentially what the roll of honour are doing in the Appassionata are playing those trills in the opening, and they come up later as well. They are playing them as a trill from below. So I'm going to look at that and look at, show where the roll of honour, where they have nothing to defend their interpretation. So that might be something to stay tuned for. And so they are all doing that incorrectly, every single one of them, but with no exception. And you might think, I can say in sort of being facetious, I'm sure when you hear that, what springs to mind is their defense of their interpretation of those trills. What they've said to defend their interpretation of the trills. I can be thinking, that'll be springing to mind When I say they're playing it wrong and I say about the angeschlossene Triller, if you're watching these videos, you can think what's come up about appoggiaturas and everything I'll say. And I'll come up, I'll present, you know, defense. Or in this case, it might be an attack on Lilliput. But I can say you know, in a facetious way, yeah, that'll spring to mind what Lilliput has, the Roll of Honour has done to defend their interpretation of the trills and what they've said to show that it's not incorrect what they're doing. I can do that because I know nothing springs to mind. You have never heard the Roll of Honour defend their way of playing the trills. And every single one of them plays them wrong. They are angeschlossene Triller. And my version of the Appassionata, that is the only version you are going to hear on YouTube that is actually correct. That is the only version you will hear that actually comes close to how Beethoven will have played it. When you listen to my version of the Appassionata, you are listening to how Beethoven will have played it. And none of the Roll of Honour play it that way. They all play it the same. And what happens in a class, you know, if you imagine in a classroom with a teacher and they give a test to the class and all the kids in the class, they all hand in their, you know, the exams, and the teacher's correcting them, and the teacher sees that every single person in that class, first of all, they got the answer wrong. And then they all had this exact same wrong answer. What is that teacher going to think? That teacher is going to think that they were all copying each other. Because how else is it possible that every single one of them can be 100% wrong, and that there's no kind of variation in the wrong answers, that they don't come up with their own wrong answers, they come up with the exact same wrong answer. The teacher will see that as evidence that those people, those kids were all copying each other, and they all copied the same wrong answer. And I see it as evidence that the Roll of Honour are all copying each other. There is not a single independent artist among them. They're all spoon-fed babies. They're like, I see babies in nappies waddling along after something, and they're all doing that. And they didn't come up with that same wrong answer independently. They are just all copying each other. And there you can see the relevance when Bach says how common it is, and a mistake that there's only one person not making, and every other person on the Roll of Honour is making that mistake. You can classify that as a common mistake. So yeah, I can look at that on occasion of the Trill from Below, because that's how Lilliput, the Roll of Honour, are playing it. So they make exactly that mistake that Lilliput Denadays made. And the only thing is the giants are gone. So the ones not making that mistake will have been Beethoven and some others who had connection to Beethoven. The rest, Lilliput, the Roll of Honour, they'll have all done it wrong. Beethoven never acknowledged that any Lilliput ever played his music properly, the way it was meant to be played. There was one person, I think he said, played it the way it was meant to be played. And this Appassionata, if you want to hear how Beethoven will have played it, listen to my upload of it and pay attention to it. And you will hear the angeschlossene Triller. The Roll of Honour, Lilliput do exactly what Bach says. They just go straight into the trill and ignore the appoggiatura. And there won't be a lot on the trill from below, but it will be the, you know, the roll of honour have nothing in their defence. Nothing springs to mind of them defending their trill. And let's say I am, it's correct, it's the truth, or what I say, and that it is 100% incorrect. Should they not have in some way justified what they're doing? And when we deal with the trills from below, I will show what they ignore, what they choose to ignore in the score. And I will show their lifeline, their hope of defense. They don't even know what that is now. The roll of honour themselves can be looking at this and thinking, oh no, what can I say in defense of that if it's wrong? And then I say there'll be a lifeline for them when Bach deals with the trills from below. They won't even know what that lifeline is, and they'll be hoping that it's something halfway decent, so they can save face, that they don't look like babies all running after the same thing, this, you know, all having the same incorrect answer. Yeah, and then the last mistake is when you know, the people play the trills loud, and I think, even though the idea should be subdued or matte and weak or soft, should be played weak and soft. And I think one can as well understand that what Bach is saying as those people who play trills that, you know, they have the trills, when they play trills, and you can hear this in people who want to, you know, sell their way, you know, that they have the way of improving your trills. And when you hear them play the trills, you can see the trills have no relationship to music. They don't exist in the world of music. They have one mode for trills, and they switch into that one gear for their trills, and it doesn't matter in what context those trills occur. It'll always be the same trill, the same mechanical typewritten trill that has nothing to do with music, nothing to do with the world of music. And one could interpret that, what Bach says, as that what they do is they just slip into this one mode of trill, and it's like, you know, switching on you know, like a machine, you know, like something that grinds coffee beans or something. You switch it on, it makes the noise, and you switch it off, and then it stops. And that's their trills, and they just switch it on and switch it off wherever a trill is meant to come. One could interpret it as that. So one could see that is still a common mistake. So it's still very much relevant what Bach is talking about. And he says they're as ugly as they are common. So those roll of honour, their playing of the Appassionata, what they do to the angeschlossene triller, that is 100% incorrect. And they can defend. They haven't got a hope. I have substance here. On this channel, I provide substance. I back things up. I have a named source. I'm just not making empty claims. I'm backing it all up. They have nothing to back it up. But now they know what Bach, if they're wondering, I hear, you know, people will go, those Lilliput, the pampered ears, they'll be wondering, they'll be so carried away with the noise they've heard, with the treffers who set the face in wonder but leave the soul nothing to do. They'll be wondering, thinking, oh, Beethoven would probably be astounded how well his music is being performed nowadays. The answer is there. They know, those people who say that, they know what Beethoven's opinion will be. And that it'll be the same as Bach's. Because think of the hall. The roll of honour are here. Beethoven and Bach are here. And what is that? The roll of honour does not consider what they do with the trill, with the angeschlossene trillers in the Appassionata. They don't consider that ugly. Bach does. You can separate them. They're all here. The roll of honour. And Bach is here. And Beethoven enters. Who does he go to? Does he go say to the roll of honour, my God, you're playing my music better than I ever thought was possible? Or does he go to Bach and saying, their mistake is as ugly as it is common? And the fact that they're all there proves how common it is. You can argue about how ugly it is, but how common it is. And let's say they're right. Well then, it's still common. Because Bach does not think they're right. Beethoven does not think they're right. But they're still common. They're all there on the one side of the hall. So either they're all right or they're all wrong. But what remains constant is that whatever it is, it's common. And the quality, it's funny, the people understand in a way, they understand the popularity of something being the validity of how much it's worth. Whereas, if they connected the stuff, a value of something is based on its rarity. How rare something is ups the value, not how common it is. So when it comes with information or insight, that's what everybody believes is meant to be the most valuable insight. And that which is on the outside is worth nothing. The two things don't, it doesn't go together. Those two things don't go together. And then finally Bach says, when one trills too much. And in dem man glaubt verbunden zu sein, jedwede etwas lange Note mit einem Triller zu bezeichnen. Here I can sort of, I can try. I don't know how I'll have it up on the screen, but one could understand it that one is translated in that one believes they're obliged to trill, to mark each and every long note with a trill. That could be verbunden. While it can mean obliged, verbunden can as well mean connected or joined. And I think it's kind of has a double meaning, and I don't know what I'll settle on, but I do think an understanding of it in that, in thinking of it like in that one believes they're being joined or playing in a legato way, or they're connecting the notes in that they trill on every long note. That would go with what Bach said in the previous paragraph, and it would go to what he said in the paragraph 10, that the professors, the Lilliput professors, would have their students trilling to compensate for the stiff left hand, and to kind of bridge it over, and they'll have their, Bach really hates this. They'll have their students trilling, and they'll be the sign of a just like with the Appassionata, how one trills, how one makes that mistake with the angeschlossene triller will be seen as great, or will be judged on how great that piano player is. Those professors back then will be judged how great they are in how many trills they have their students playing. And those students will be considered great by how many trills they cram in to a piece, and that they don't leave a single long note out, like, without a trill. If they manage to trill on every single long note in the piece, well, then they are really good. That'll have been the attitude then, and that would be the attitude on YouTube now. If that was the practice. It's not the practice now, but if it was, that is the best professors and the best people would be the ones trilling on every note. And the advice that all the YouTube channels would have, the videos would have, is how to improve your pieces, and they'll be telling you to trill on every single long note. So that could be understood as people who believe they're connected because they trill on every single note, or people can think they're obliged to trill on each and every somewhat long note. I see both as fitting, within the context. Yeah. What I say about Lilliput is actually true, and I'm gonna be showing all those cases, like very black and white, unambiguous cases that show up Lilliput for who they are. And there'll be, I can see, like, with this Appassionata, there'll be people who'll run off, and I don't know what it is. Do they not recognize that that I'm actually presenting something as substance? They don't ever understand, like, they don't recognize when something is just an empty claim, or when it's being backed up. I don't know. Do they not know that? But I can understand they don't like it, because I'm showing them up for who they are. They are actually Lilliput. I'm not calling them Lilliput because I don't like them. I'm calling Lilliput because they are Lilliput. You don't have to be Lilliput. I am providing here the chance to get there where Bach is. To be, when you have that information and you look at the Appassionata and you don't make that same mistake, that proves that their shopping lists are all the same. They're copying each other's shopping list. They are not artists. I could turn Kissin or Sokolov into artists, into actual independent artists, because at the moment they are in there in the roll of honor. And I can see Sokolov, if you've looked at if you listen to his third movement, I listen to it after I uploaded mine. Generally, I'm not listening to these people at all, but sometimes I'll listen after I upload something. You can hear Sokolov is trying. I talked in a video about the appoggiatura in K330 in the third movement, and I went through the different options that one has, holding it for, like 3 quavers long as a short unchangeable appoggiatura, or for 2/3 of the value of the note. And you can see he picked one of them. He picked the one holding it for its longest for half the value of the bar. And you could see that if you watch that video and see how I go through all the options, that what Sokolov did was he picked he tried to do it differently, but he picked the wrong option. It shows that his lack of insight. So, but he does try. He just gets it wrong. He doesn't have enough insight. And that stops him from being an actual independent artist. That doesn't take him out of this and put him here. And it's the same, with Kissin. He'll as well try, but he's stuck. If it's not on a shopping list, he doesn't know, because he's lacking the necessary insight. And there is a chance that you will get that insight here that they lack, that they might not know it, they might not acknowledge it, but they would love to have it. And were I to give it to them, they'd be thanking me profusely for it, because they'd want to explore all the music again and actually get it right, because they would then have a chance to hear it the way it's meant to be heard. And you know, you might not, I don't know, but I'm just gonna keep going. I'll keep putting this out, and in the next video I'll talk, and I'm even kind of going out on a limb here, because I haven't really actually properly, I'm only basing it on my own recollection of my own search for the right truth, but I haven't actually, I'm the sort of a person who I'll look up something 100 times and I still, afterwards, I'm still not confident that I have it right. So I still look it up 101 times, you know, I just don't have that confidence. So I feel that lack of confidence now when I say it, and when I have commit myself to, I don't like commitment, so committing myself to that in the, you know, in the next paragraphs where I'm going to be showing that, it's like there's still that kind of fear that it won't be there anymore or something. What I know is there, but I'll be presenting that. So you can think, when you see it, you can reserve your judgment of me, what sort of a person you think I am, and you can compare what I bring forth to what the roll of honour have said to defend their incorrect interpretation of the angeschlossene Trillers in Beethoven's Appassionata, in the first movement of Beethoven's Passionata. And maybe you should be on them, hold their feet to the fire and say, maybe, especially if you're paying for an education, that you should, or paying for masterclasses from these, that maybe they should do something to justify. They should start saying something of substance for once, instead of all these superficial platitudes and, you know, volume controls. I mean, I saw a masterclass on YouTube, and what they talked about, that opening trill, it should be pianissimo, but not too pianissimo, but just a little bit pianissimo, but not as much pianissimo as the next bit. I mean, it's just a ridiculous, finicky volume control, and they're meant to be at the very top. It's pathetic. It is completely devoid of any insight and any substance. So I'm going to present something in defense of what I'm saying, to back it up. Maybe at some point they should be backing up something, and you should be after them to start backing it up, and not just, you know, slamming me for daring to criticize them. But it's I had a professor, like there was a professor I encountered, and they said, no, not Mozart. Mozart is mine. No. They couldn't hear. They were afraid to hear what I had to say about Mozart, because it means all they knew, all that they had, that gave them value, was gone. It means that you can, with the Appassionata, that roll of honour will be forgotten. As soon as it's understood that their answer is the wrong answer, that's it. It's all irrelevant what they've done. They will be as forgotten as the roll of honour. Nobody knows the roll of honour existed in the time of Bach. Nobody. Because history doesn't record them. History is not going to record the wrong answer. It was just a detour. It just went off the rails. And I think it was the Romantic period that sort of set it off that way. And, you know, and modern music shows how lost all those generations are. And this now could be a new time of a new generation and a new direction of music, and where we get it back on track. In classical music, I'm talking about. We get it back on track, and the Bachs and Beethovens and Mozarts return. And that'll be seen in its proper context as people losing the way, groping around in the dark. What is modern music, atonal music, if it's not groping around in the dark? That it gets so bad, the spoon feeding gets so bad that people don't know anything anymore. And all they can come up with is random noise. And they'll just try and justify it with numbers or whatever it is they justify it with, but it will have nothing to do with nature because they have no connection to nature. They live in a cage. Their notes have no consequence. They do not know the world of music. You have to escape the cage and return to the world of music, and you will recognize the rightness of the angeschlossene Triller. You will recognize the rightness of the correct answer to the Appassionata, and you will see how flat the Roll of Honours version actually is. So that's it. When you see how valuable Bach considers the ability to be able to think in a singing way, how valuable it is to know to give every note its weight and sustain. You could imagine maybe I might want that too. And if Sokolov and Kissin don't want it or don't feel they need it, well then they're lost. They're lost. I don't believe it. I admire them a lot. Just because you lack certain insight doesn't mean, you're a bad person or anything. I don't believe that they wouldn't be interested in that, because I believe they do genuinely care about being artists. But the shopping list, making that mistake that everybody makes, copying other people, that is not what makes an artist. You can be an artist. Just keep listening, considering, and these things go deep. They are constantly relevant all the time. And it doesn't matter how quickly something can be said. You can say one breathes in, one breathes out. That's it. You can think that's the most irrelevant information in the world, given how short that information is, how quick it's communicated. But that'll be relevant your whole life. And you can think about that and consider it, and you can come up with realizations. Alone from that, there'll be realizations that can be come up with. One just has to spend time with it. Just let it lie there. And that's with Bach. He is sharing his insight. You're getting a sense of the person Bach. The person Bach doesn't exist with Lilliput. You'll hear Bach school this, Bach school that, but you're actually getting to know Bach here on this channel. You're hearing his words. Eventually, by the end of the book, it's like Bach was here, because in a way, he is like the co-creator of this channel. He is deciding on the overall structure. He's just deciding on the topic. He is, obviously, but in a huge way, his input is steering this channel. He is here. You can get to know him here, and you'll know. It'll be like a friend at the end. Okay, I'll leave it at that, and yeah, stay tuned for the next paragraphs. Thanks. Bye.